Alrighty, Broncos country. Looks like we are live here, but you guys know the drill by now. Just got to let the stream breathe for just a second here and make sure that everything is nice and stable all across the YouTube platform. Alrighty, guys, looks like we are good. I wanted to jump back live here because this was such a big win, Broncos country. This was one of those wins that can really take momentum and carry you throughout the entire season. The Broncos now sitting at 2-2. They are at 500. They have a chance to take their season really in any direction that they want to. The way that they played today on the defensive side of the ball really gives me a lot of hope and optimism heading into the future. It makes me truly believe that the Denver Broncos can go out there and they can defeat any given opponent, especially with the way that they are playing physical, aggressive up front, not afraid to blitz, not afraid to play press man coverage. They're not afraid to get in your face, and they're not afraid to play to win. You've seen in years past, especially under Vic Fangio, Denver Broncos defenses be very passive. Play not to lose the game, play to make the offense go downfield and beat you with 12 play drives, death by 1,000 paper cuts, play soft zone coverage, keep everything in front of you. And yeah, there was a time about 4 years ago where that method did have some madness to it. That was when Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen were running rampant in the NFL, and they hadn't learned how to read defenses yet. They were still trying to force stuff downfield. They didn't learn to take underneath throws if they were available. And that's when that too high soft zone, too high shell coverage, the Fangio defense really started to take mold in the NFL. Well, eventually the NFL, including Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, the guys who this defense was designed to beat to begin with, started to evolve. They started to run the ball more. The run game made a massive resurgence in the NFL over the past 4 seasons. They've also started to attack the underneath zones. Instead of trying to force stuff downfield, they learned that if the flat route's open against cover 4 or cover 6, you're going to take that 10 times out of 10 and let your tight end or let your running back get yards after the catch. That is a formula that offenses have found works against these Fangio too high coverages. Last season, Vance Joseph comes in, and the Broncos were one of the better too high Fangio teams in 2022 under Ejiro Evero. Vance Joseph wanted to keep that sort of continuity with the scheme and the terminology. So he basically evolved into coaching that Fangio too high shell. And he tried to hybridize some of that stuff in with his normal scheme, his single high scheme, and it just didn't blend well. A single high, more Wade Phillips type scheme is not going to blend well with a passive Vic Fangio style scheme. And it all came to a head week 3 against the Miami Dolphins when the Dolphins hung 70 on the Broncos. Literally averaged 10 yards per carry on the ground because they could not stop the run. The Broncos were playing with these insanely light defensive fronts. They were also playing super soft, squishy coverage, allowing Tyreek Hill to spam the middle of the field. After that game, we saw fundamental changes from Vance Joseph. It started with personnel changes, first of all. They got rid of Randy Gregory. They got rid of Frank Clark. They got rid of Essane Bassi. That allowed guys like Jonathan Cooper, Nick Bonito, Jaquan McMillan to take shape and get roles on this team. And then we started to see Vance Joseph sort of go back to his Wade Phillips schematic roots. A lot more single high, a lot more blitzing, a lot more heavy defensive fronts, a lot more stacking the box, being physical, getting in the face of the opponent, and not being passive and leaving them free yards for the taking underneath, not giving wide receivers free releases at the line of scrimmage. Last year, as the season progressed, the problem was that the Broncos just didn't really have the personnel to run that style of defense, especially up front on the defensive line. And we saw the run defense get exposed in games like the Houston Texans game and the Detroit Lions game because Jonathan Harris, as one-year starting defensive lineman, isn't going to cut it. DJ Jones wasn't playing well last year. Zach Allen was kind of a one-man wrecking crew on that defensive line. Now, Zach Allen actually has help with guys like John Franklin Myers. DJ Jones is playing better. Malcolm Roach, a massive addition on that defensive line. And now, actually having gap cloggers up front allows the Broncos to play a more aggressive physical brand of defense. More man coverage on the back end because they can trust their line to win up front. A lot less of this squishy, soft zone. You got to give credit where it's due to Vance Joseph because he has done a phenomenal job of pivoting away from what has not worked for them schematically and pivoting into what has worked brilliantly for them over the course of these first 4 weeks. We saw flashes that this defense could be brilliant in training camp, and now it's translating into the regular season. There are multiple sequences in this game against the New York Jets that I really want to point out here because they were sequences that made big time differences in this football game. Just give me 1 second here to bring in that information. Bingo. So the drives that I really want to look at here are the first drive where the New York Jets had to kick a field goal. The Denver Broncos were faced with a goal-to-go situation at the 1 yard line. They stonewalled the New York Jets 3 times and then forced a false start on 4th down and goal. Aaron Rodgers, with that hard count, got his own guys to jump multiple times on it, and it backed them up and forced the Jets to kick a field goal on 4th down and goal from the 5 yard line. That was a huge sequence right there for the Broncos that kept the New York Jets out of the end zone. I then want to take a look at the next field goal drive heading into halftime. Good job there at the end, stalling them out, forcing that field goal. Then we come over here once again. The drive stalls out. Vance Joseph dials up pressure on 3rd down and 11, flushes Aaron Rodgers out, and he ends up dumping it down for only a 2 yard gain, forces yet another field goal. Turnover on downs. Vance Joseph on 4th down and 10 brought an all-out blitz, and Aaron Rodgers didn't even have time to set his feet before P.J. Locke had him on the ground. Obviously, Denver was able to drive downfield. They missed the field goal, and then the football gods were in Denver's favor because Greg Zuerlein also missed the field goal. They did give up a couple of completions on that drive. Riley Moss, defensive pass interference. That was just a tough situation for Moss to be in. There wasn't really a whole lot he could have done on that particular given play. So the Denver Broncos are turning into a defensive-centric team. This team has built a full-blown identity on the defensive side of the ball, and they've showcased that they can win football games with this formula. They generated all kinds of pressure on Aaron Rodgers. They sacked him 5 times in this game. Last week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they sacked Baker Mayfield 7 times. This coming game against the Las Vegas Raiders, the Broncos have a more favorable matchup with a weakened Raiders offensive line. They've got injuries at right tackle. Their only really solid offensive lineman that they have is Colton Miller, their left tackle. The Broncos' defensive line, especially on the interior, with John Franklin Myers, Zach Allen, DJ Jones, Malcolm Roach, those guys have a chance to feast next week against a really favorable matchup on paper. This matchup on paper favored the New York Jets, but the Denver Broncos went in there, won the war of attrition, and they proved that they can compete with pretty much any offensive line in the NFL. That defensive line is that nasty, and it really reminds me a lot of the old Wade Phillips defensive lines in 2015 and 2016, and it brings a tear to my eye seeing the Broncos, for really the first time since then, play a physical, aggressive brand of defense. We've got Ray in the house. Good evening, Gage and Broncos country. Hell of a win. That was one of those wins that just leaves you feeling kind of emotionally drained afterwards. You just feel spent, man. The way that the first half played out, the defense was lights out. The offense could not generate anything. And then in the second half, the offense finally helped their defense out. And that was when the defense finally started to gain some confidence playing with a lead. And that led to the game starting to break open for the Denver Broncos. We got Maverick in the house. Greetings, everyone, again. Who's that Jets analyst that was always praising Nathaniel Hackett that you were referring to earlier? I want to say it was Connor Hughes. In fact, I'm going to go look it up on Twitter just to make sure. I want to say it's Connor Hughes. Yeah, it's Connor Hughes. That's him. Yes. Last season, wrote all kinds of Nathaniel Hackett defense pieces when we all know Nathaniel Hackett was a problem in Denver in 2022, a major problem. There were other problems as clear and evident as it's become over these last few months, but Nathaniel Hackett was not free of blame there whatsoever. Nix was very resilient. He keeps coming no matter what. I like that about him. 100%. You have a quarterback who, even though he may not play his best football in the first half, can come back and showcase, no, we are not going to go down without a fight. I'm going to keep kicking you in the teeth until my last breath. That's something I really like about Bo Nix. I got a feeling that if he had the opportunity to get the ball back in that week 1 game up in Seattle, that Bo would have possibly led the Broncos downfield for a score. I believe Bo has that intestinal fortitude to shake off his bad play from early in the game and just focus on right here, right now. The fact of the matter was the Broncos were only down by 6 points. Bo Nix was able to lead them downfield on a 11-play drive, made some really nice throws, especially on that in-breaker to Cortland Sutton in a really tight window. That kind of jump-started that whole drive for them. That was huge. The fact that Bo Nix showed that resilience was really, really cool. And then the final drive as well put the Broncos in position there to kick that field goal to basically put the game away. Obviously, Will Lutz, he didn't come through in that situation. That was Will's first miss of the season. Besides that, Will Lutz has been money this year, so I'm not going to hold that against him. And then Greg Zuerlein, the football gods were on the Broncos' side because Greg Zuerlein also missed the game-winning kick. And even if Zuerlein had made that kick, the way that the Jets had managed that game situationally, the Broncos were going to get the football back with 47 seconds left and 1 timeout, even if that kick was good. The Broncos would have had an opportunity to drive downfield with 47 seconds and a timeout to get in position to kick a field goal of their own. Will Lutz would have had an opportunity to redeem himself. So the Broncos managed that game at the end situationally about as well as they could. Sean popped the timeout at the perfect time. The Jets ended up throwing incomplete on 3rd down, which allowed the Denver Broncos to not have to burn that timeout. So they had a safety net there in their back pocket, even if Greg Zuerlein had made that last kick. So at the end of the day, the Broncos outcoached the New York Jets in this game. As much crap as we wanted to give Sean Payton after that first half for not managing the game well, not putting the offense in the best position to succeed, Bo Nix struggling to throw the football in that wet weather, they found a way to win. They found a way to capitalize on the New York Jets' mistakes. If we come over here, I want to take a look at the New York Jets, how many penalties they had in this game. The New York Jets shot themselves in the foot over and over and over again. 13 penalties for 90 yards. Denver had 5 penalties for 74 yards. Obviously, if you're Denver, you want to clean some of those penalty issues up. But from New York's perspective, that reminds me truly of Nathaniel Hackett football. Consistently shoot yourself in the foot. They got in shotgun and ran the ball in shotgun on 4th down and inches. I remember when they got up to the goal line there, 4th down and 1, or 4th down and goal from the 1. They get in shotgun. They do a hard count, which you should never do on the goal line when you're about to go in and score. That's when you're backed up on your own goal line. That's when you can do a hard count, and it would make sense at the goal line, not at your opponent's goal line when you're getting ready to score. Just the way that the Jets situationally botched that game, they really deserve to lose. And credit to the Denver Broncos because they capitalized on almost every single mistake that the New York Jets made, especially in that second half. The first half, Jets did give the ball to the Broncos with good field position, and they didn't make good on it. But defensively, the defense just kept fighting and fighting and fighting, and they kept them in it. And then we obviously have to talk about the officiating in this game. There was some poor officiating for the Broncos. I thought, of course, Aaron Rodgers with that fumble, it definitely looked like that ball was coming out before his knee or his elbow was down. That should have been a fumble and a scoop and score for Jonah Ellis to boot. That ended up getting called back, and Sean Payton was out of challenges. The first challenge by Sean Payton was a bad challenge. The second one, it definitely looked like Garrett Wilson was out of bounds, and that wasn't a good catch. I don't understand why the officials didn't rule that as incomplete. It looked like, honestly, the green socks that Garrett Wilson was wearing saved him because it blended well with the color of the turf, and you couldn't see definitively if his knee was out. But I don't know, man. It was very questionable. The Broncos should have won that challenge, and they should have had the opportunity to challenge that last play where obviously that one was easily going to get reversed. But at the end of the day, the Denver Broncos found a way to overcome it, and that didn't matter. The Broncos teams of the last couple of years, they wouldn't have been able to find a way to overcome something like that. They would have essentially ended up just giving up and dying right after that. The first PI on Moss was bad as well. Yes, it really was. There was virtually nothing there. It looked like he was just playing the football. The second one, that one was clear and obvious PI. I have no issues at all with that call. It was clear as day. He didn't turn his head, wasn't playing the ball. That one was pass interference all day long, but the first one was definitely questionable. Well, we got the Chargers leading the Chiefs 10-7. Chargers came into this game beat up with all kinds of injuries, and they're still finding a way to overcome it and win. Or so they're winning, I should say. I saw that Rashee Rice got carted off there in the first half, so that's going to bear something to monitor there for the Kansas City Chiefs. Despite Riley Moss's PIs, he's looked good. Both were questionable on my side. I thought that the second one definitely warranted a flag. The first one, no way. But Riley Moss has been physical, resilient, much like Bo Nix. When he has a bad play, he will come right back and he will bounce back on the very next play. It's really good to see, man. The Broncos have something long-term here in Riley Moss. They really do. The fact that the only completions he's really giving up are perfectly timed back shoulders that are almost undefendable, that gives you a lot of promise and a lot of optimism heading into the future with Riley Moss. I'm super pleased with how well he's played. And I just unplugged my laptop. Now, we do have to address some of the issues with this game. I thought, once again, the wide receiving core did not come through. Courtland Sutton was basically your only offense through the air. 3 catches for 60 yards. Your next leading receiver after that, Mike Burton, 1 catch for 3 yards. Javonte Williams, 2 catches for 3 yards. A bunch of guys with a catch for no yardage. Troy Franklin, 2 catches, -2 yards. Tyler Badie, 2 catches, -4 yards before he got injured. We still don't have an injury update on Badie, but the lack of production from the Denver Broncos pass catchers is becoming really concerning. Yes, the Broncos were throwing behind the line of scrimmage a ton in the first half, but still, we had drops. Where the hell was Josh Reynolds in this game? Reynolds put up a big goose egg. He was non-existent. Tight end, no production from the tight end position. A big goose egg from Greg Dulcich, a big goose egg from Adam Troutman. Lucas Kroll has been inactive, so we haven't seen anything from him. The weapons for the Denver Broncos have been sorely disappointing. And yes, Bo Nix was skittish in that first half. He wasn't throwing the ball well. He was missing some open receivers, but still, guys weren't helping him out. Guys weren't getting open. And when Courtland Sutton 3 catches for 60 yards is your best receiver on the day, that's a problem. You need somebody else to step up and help out Bo Nix. To the credit of the run game, though, this was the best game that we saw easily from the Denver Broncos when it came to the run game. Javonte Williams finally had a bounce-back performance. 16 carries, 77 yards, 4.8 yards per carry. Jaleel McLaughlin brought some nice burst explosiveness. 9 carries, 46 yards, 5.1 yards per carry. Unfortunately, we didn't really get to see a whole lot out of Tyler Bidet before he got hurt. So the run game, that was a positive. But the receiving game, the receiving core is still a big issue. Offensive line for the Denver Broncos, they played super well today. They kept Bo's jersey fresh, allowed 0 sacks on the day. Alex Palczewski, he did have a holding call, but outside of that, we didn't really hear from him. Anytime you don't hear about an offensive lineman, that's always good news. Garrett Bowles, didn't hear his name once in this game. That was really good to see. I thought that the interior of the offensive line played well. There was one point where Quinnen Williams did beat Luke Wattenberg, but outside that, the defensive line played great. Is Vele still injured? Yes, he is still injured. He is dealing with that rib injury, probably a fracture. Broncos are wanting to be smart and cautious. It might be another week or two before we see Devon Vele on the field. Maybe week 7 versus the Saints. That might be the game to keep an eye on there for Vele. Broncos got to get an ace wide receiver in this draft. Who are your most intriguing prospects so far? Got to be honest, Maverick, I have not even started scouting yet. I don't do that until after the season's over. Like, I've watched a little bit of college football. Obviously, Travis Hunter is the top receiver and the top corner right now that you can think of, or at least one of my top receivers, but I haven't scouted at all. I don't really watch a whole lot of college football in season. It's mostly during the off season when I'm scouting. I'll watch some CU. I'll watch a little bit of college football here or there, but I don't really scout at this point in time, so I couldn't really answer your question, to be honest with you. Later down the line, as we get closer to December or hopefully January, hopefully that's when I will start scouting, is whenever the Broncos season's done. Again, hopefully it's January, because that would mean the Broncos made the playoffs. All right, guys. So overall, man, this is one of those wins that you can build momentum on. Like I said at the beginning of this stream, this is also one of those wins that gives you confidence heading into the next game. The Broncos have a beatable opponent on paper in the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders haven't played good football. Devontae Adams probably not going to play in that game. Max Crosby, he's going to be probably questionable to play in that game. The Raiders have offensive line issues. Their quarterback situation is a mess. Their coaching situation is a mess. It's an opponent on paper that you should dominate. The Broncos are going to come into this game motivated, having not beaten the Raiders since the 2019 season. They haven't beaten the Raiders since COVID. They have never beaten the Las Vegas Raiders. That is something that the Broncos are going to want to change. Last season was all about beating streaks. The Broncos finally snapped that Kansas City Chiefs streak. This time, they're going to be looking to snap the streak against the Las Vegas Raiders. And after the 2-game road trip where you spent that week in between in West Virginia, you are going to feel good about that road trip if you came back 1-1. Now that you're coming back 2-0 after that trip, dude, you're riding high right now. The confidence is as high as it's ever been for the Denver Broncos. There's still stuff that has to be cleaned up offensively. Bo Nix has to play better, especially in the first half. But at the end of the day, he was the only quarterback between him and Aaron Rodgers that was able to lead his team to the end zone. He was the quarterback that walked out of there with the victory. I don't care how you get it done, as long as you find a way to win. And the Denver Broncos found a way to win in this game. All right, guys. We're going to wrap this up. I'm going to go and start watching some of the other games and possibly find some content for my other channel, Sparkin' Sports Football. Check out Sparkin' Sports Football if you have yet to do so. Would really appreciate it. But before we dip out of here, guys, if you could just do me a big favor and leave a like on this stream, as well as subscribe to the channel, I would really appreciate it, guys. Those are both free and easy ways to show your support. It helps tell YouTube's algorithm to push us out, and it helps us get seen by more and more members of Broncos country, just like you and me. Thank you to DB94, Ray, Maverick, Gabe Rocks, C, Nick, and Quentin as well, Browntown. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. And until next time, guys, I am your host, Gage Madrid, saying peace out.